Mr. Arnold here. In this section, we are going to start with the square root property. To use the square root property to solve for x, all you need to do for this first example is divide both sides by 4. The 4's cancel, leaving us with x squared equal to 49 over 4. To get rid of the exponent, just take the square root of both sides. So we have on the left-hand side x, and be careful when you take the square root of a number, you're going to have a plus and a minus symbol. And the square root of 49 is 7, and the square root of 4 is 2. Write your answer in two separate ways. You can write it like this, or you can write it separately as negative 7 over 2 and positive 7 over 2 as a solution set. Let's look at the next example. Example 2, we need to solve for x. The first thing is to get rid of the exponent. To do that, take the square root of both sides. Left-hand side, we're just left with plain x minus 3. The right-hand side cannot be simplified, but you need to put the plus and minus symbol in front of the radical. We're almost finished. We need to solve for x or isolate x. So we need to add 3 to both sides. So we have x is equal to 3 plus or minus the square root of 10. It's probably a good idea to express your answer as a solution set. So we have two answers. 3 minus square root of 10, and also 3 plus square root of 10. Next up, let's talk about how to solve by another method by completing the square. We need to solve this quadratic equation. You can solve by various ways, by just regular factoring, completing the square, or the last resort that we'll talk about in another video is the quadratic formula. Let's go over the steps on how to complete the square. The first step, make sure that any number is on the right hand side. So for this example, we need to add 1 to both sides. So we have x squared plus 4x equal to 1. Now, here's how to complete the square. You take half of the middle term. What is the middle term? Right, the middle term is 4. So half of 4 will give you 2. So you take half of the middle term, which is 2, and then square it. So half of 4 is 2. and then we square 2 to get 4. What we do with this 4 is add it to here. Whatever you add to the left-hand side, you must add to the right-hand side to balance out the equation. So we need to add 4 to the right-hand side as well. The left-hand side is just a basic trinomial that we can factor as x plus 2 squared. Now, at this stage, this looks mighty familiar. The last example we did where we had to get the exponent by itself. So the next step is to take the square root of both sides. So we have x plus 2 equal to plus or minus square root of 5. One last step. To solve for x, we need to subtract 2 from both sides. Therefore, we have negative 2 plus or minus square root of 5. And like before, we need to express this answer as a solution set. So our final answer would be negative 2 minus square root of 5 and negative 2 plus square root of 5. So these are the steps you need to perform in order to complete the square. Let's look at one more example. Okay, we have this example. We already have the number by itself. Now, one thing to consider, in order to use completing the square, the leading coefficient has to be 1. In other words, that number in front of the x squared has to be 1. So what we need to do is factor out or divide each of those two terms by 2. So we can just factor out a 2. And we're left inside x squared plus 2x. Now, the next step, take half of the middle term, which the middle term is 2. Half of 2 is just 1. And then you square that. So in other words, half of 2 is 1. And if you square 1, that's still 1. So we need to put plus 1 here. Now be careful. It would be wrong to put a plus 1 on the other side, only because there's a 2 on the outside here. So really, we're adding 2 times 1 to the other side. Okay, this part here is a perfect trinomial, so we can factor it into x plus 1 squared. And on the right-hand side, that will just give you 5. Now, you're trying to get the x plus 1 squared by itself. So we need to divide both sides by 2. Now we have the x plus 1 squared alone. Next step, we need to take the square root of both sides. So we have x plus 1 equal to square root of 5 over square root of 2. We can split it up because we want the denominator to not have a radical. So on the right-hand side, we need to rationalize the denominator just a bit. To rationalize the denominator, you just multiply the top and the bottom by square root of 2. So we have x plus 1 equal to square root of 10 over 2. Now, still solving for x, we need to subtract 1 from both sides. And if you notice, one thing I forgot to include, the plus and minus symbol. So we have negative 1 plus or minus square root of 10 over 2. So again, do not forget that symbol. It is very important. Now we need to clean this answer up just a little bit. I can rewrite negative 1 as negative 2 over 2. Now, since they both share the fractions share the same denominator, we can write this as one whole fraction. So we have negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 10 over 2. And if you want to, as recommended, you could split this up into 2 answers, or I would even accept this combined answer. Of course, if you have any questions, always feel free to email me or contact me, and I'll be glad to assist you. Okay, also in this section, you have some formulas that we will use to find various things. The first thing I want to go over with you is the Pythagorean theorem. And let me pan out so you can read the whole question. A supporting wire is to be attached to the top of a 70-foot antenna if the wire must be anchored 70 feet from the base of the antenna. What length of wire is required? So it sounds like we're working with some type of triangle, namely a right triangle. So the first step is to draw a right triangle. And the supporting wire is to be attached to the top of a 70-foot antenna. So this leg is 70 feet. And if the wire must be anchored 70 feet from the base of the antenna, this is also 70 feet. So what we're looking for is the hypotenuse. Anytime you have a right triangle, use the Pythagorean theorem. which is a squared plus b squared equal to c squared. And actually, a and b are the two legs of the triangle, which in this case, they're both 70. So in place of a and b, plug in 70. When you square both 70s, you would get 4,900 for each. Which would equal to 9,800. To solve for C, or to find the length of wire that's required, take the square root of both sides. Now, the textbook or MyMathLab might ask you for two answers, a simplified radical answer and also a decimal answer. Simplified radical, we can break this up as 4,900 times 2. And we just saw earlier that the square root of 4,900 is 70. If the directions ask you to find the exact value, I'm sorry, not the exact value, but the approximate value, then you just plug this into your calculator. Sorry for the shakiness here, I'm looking through my notes. So the wire would approximately be equal to 99 feet. So at this stage of this section is when we're going to start using formulas. Another formula that we'll be using is, let's say you have 2 points and you need to find the distance between them. And again, let me pan out so you can read the whole question. It says find the distance between -1, -3, and 2, 3. Express the answer in simplified radical form and then round to 2 decimal places. The distance formula is the following. D is equal to the square root of x sub 2 minus x sub 1 squared plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1 squared, where x1 and x2 are basically your first x value and your second x value, and y1 and y2 are your first y and second y respectively. So we know everything. Now we can plug in our x's and y's. So we have 2 minus, and be careful, x sub 1 is already a negative, so you're going to have 2 negatives right there. And then at the end, plug in your y's. Again, same situation with the signs. So we have the square root of 2 plus 1 squared plus 3 plus 3 squared. Now, just a little bit of math. So 3 squared plus 6 squared and that will give us 9 plus 36. Which would give us also now square root of 45. And in simplified radical form, 45 has a perfect square root as its factor. We can break down 45 as 9 times 5. And we know the square root of 9, of course, is 3 on the square root of 5. Excuse me, square root of 9 is 3, and we're left with 5. So that's going to be your simplified radical answer. To find the decimal answer, you just plug this into your calculator. And when we plug in 3 square root of 5 into our calculator, we get approximately 1.09 for the decimal distance. So make sure that you know all the various formulas because they will help you. We've already gone over 2 of them, the distance formula and Pythagorean theorem. One last formula to discuss, and that is the midpoint formula. It says find the midpoint of the line segment with endpoints 1, 2, and 7, negative 3. The first step is to write down your midpoint formula. So the midpoint formula is as an ordered pair, x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and also y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Pretty straightforward formula, just watch your signs. And we're going to plug in our x values, 1 and 7. And we're also going to plug in our y values, 2 minus 3. At this stage, simplify. So we have 8 over 2, and also negative 1 over 2. So therefore, the midpoint of our 2 endpoints is the ordered pair 4 and negative 1/2. This concludes everything you need to know from this section. Look out for a video where we will be discussing other things from Chapter 11. Thanks.